So I don't know if that had started already, but again, I just said I had to hit the go live on OBS. It always takes a second to catch up. What's going on though? Who do we have in here? We have a few people in here already. What's up, my friend? What's up, Mute? How you doing? Brad, Hot Chutney. Okay. Good morning. Howdy, howdy. Hello from London. Nice. So yeah, we have people all over, and I'm based out of New York, so this is my post-market little coffee on hand. If you guys are drinking coffee, if it's the morning where you are, if you're insane and you're drinking coffee at night, happy to have you guys. Again, oh, so all this is new. You can see I have a little bit of fancy editing going on. I have my green screen so that I could fit nicely onto your screen without really getting in the way or imposing myself on the chart, instead of having that big box in the bottom. I know, so I'm catching up to all of the other YouTubers that already have all their fancy setups and whatnot. So for those of you that are new, how's it going? Welcome to BlockRoots YouTube channel. Myself and my partner Josh Rager want to thank you guys for tuning in. So we're going to go over a few things this morning. Obviously, going to go over what seems to be some positive price action. It's about time. Don't want to call it too early though, even though we're pretty much floating through all areas that I would say should technically have acted as resistance up to this point. So if bears were going to do a good job of imposing themselves, I think it would have came a little bit sooner. The only time that I wouldn't assume that is if it's technically a top, and we're going to have subsequent highs that follow the first high that are lower and lower, and then we form a much larger range. I don't necessarily think that's where we sit. I think that on a larger macro scale, I think there's again, a bigger growth driver at play. So let me say hi to everybody. What's going on, Mustafa? Okay. Luis, how you doing? Good morning from Mexico. Nice, nice. A place that I have not visited, but I do want to visit. Boy, hey ho, dude. What's going on? Freddie, Edney, morning from Brazil. Nice. Okay, Crypto Kid, beard trim. Beard is trimmed. Yeah, I gotta, studio quality, man. I gotta get the beard trimmed. I looked like, some kind of wilderness dude in the last videos. Good morning from Texas, Ryan. It's Kilgore from CT. What's up, buddy? MRA, how's it going, man? Matt Hood, Isael, what's going on, pal? And Hulk, white chart. I'm blind. I'm sorry, man. I prefer the white chart. I prefer the white chart, honestly, to a fault, because at night, if I'm looking at charts late at night, it'll be like an hour in where I'm just like, what the hell is going on with my eyes? And I know that, bright light at the end of the night is not good, so I'll have to put my night mode on. The problem is, I used to put on, what's going on, Stan? How's it going on, pal? I said, how's it going on, pal? How's it going, pal? Crypto Cord. So the problem with it is that, I have to save an alternative version of a dark chart, because if I put my dark chart on right now, what it's going to do is it's going to leave all the drawings the same color. So it's almost like I wish that TradingView was intuitive, and I could actually just have sort of a what would be the completely change contrast, or what's that called when you flip flip all the colors? Can't think of the actual word right now. But I wish that TradingView had it so that whenever I put on nighttime mode, it would know that maybe some of my daytime trend lines and drawings are not suitable for the darker color that it changed to. So I wish it just kind of flipped that. So instead of that, I'm doing the light, because I have a lot of dark lines and I honestly don't feel like going through and changing all the colors on those. So if you could find out a way for me to do that in a very expedited fashion, I would be more than happy to. But I don't think that that's possible. So what's going on, guys? All good, sir. Understood. Yeah, you know what? I'll work on that for the next stream. I will make an alternative nighttime version, because that's partially me being lazy. But and if you think that's bad, I have these lights that are on me now, because I got a green screen, because I plan on doing some other things that are a little bit creative, but nothing. I point out in the last live stream, I talked about how there's a lot of crypto YouTubers, and what they try to do is to attract attention through sensationalism, and for all we know, they're talking about trading Bitcoin and investing in cryptocurrencies, but 2 months ago they were working at Radio Shack. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that. And actually, it's funny that I say Radio Shack because that was like one of my first jobs when I was a kid. I think I was 16 and I worked at Radio Shack. Either that was, no, my first job was at a pet store. Worked at a pet store. Friend of the family's friend owned a pet store. I think I was 15 or 16. And after that, I worked at Radio Shack. But either way, there's a lot of crypto YouTubers. And you know, they try to gain your attention with sensationalism, and you know, you've seen it. They put the face on the freaking icon, and it says something that's, you know, absolutely a hyperbolic statement. You know, like, is Bitcoin going to zero? Tune in for, you know how it works. It works in every single avenue in life when it comes to attracting attention. You have to say something provocative. Okay, so I have these lights because lighting up the green screen. So everything right now, it sort of looks like I'm staring at a semi truck on its way. Okay, so anyway, talk about Bitcoin. Obviously, you're going to talk about alts. We'll take your requests with charts. Do not give me an entire scroll of alts to chart. If you could share one or two, I'd be happy to take a look at them. So yeah, just as a reminder, we have the Phemex trading competition that is coming up in about 2 weeks now. So if you would like to sign up to myself and Josh's team, go ahead, search BlockRoots. I posted the link on my Twitter page, so you can go ahead and just click on that and join right up. So that starts pretty soon. There's a decent amount of Bitcoin that's at stake. Trading competitions are just, they're not something that really anyone takes too seriously. So people are going to be trying to swing for the fences, and that's understandable. It's a very small amount of capital that you put at risk. Could be a good time though, nevertheless. And then, I think that does it with regards to talking about any kind of news updates. So yeah, this morning, one thing to talk about, Jerome Powell talking about cryptocurrencies, and we'll just go to the tweet deck because I shared this. If you don't have a tweet deck, it's very useful. Okay, for those of you that are constantly perusing Twitter, unless you like that setup where you're just looking at your one feed, the tweet deck allows you to obviously have multiple feeds. In this case, I have 8 feeds right here. This is one of my tweet decks. This is sort of a little bit of macro, a little bit of cryptocurrency, and then the most important thing. And if I knew the guy, I'd send him something. But is the Walter Bloomberg Delta One. So Walter Bloomberg, he is your breaking news on Twitter before, I want to say, anyone and everyone. The closest thing to actually having a Bloomberg terminal, which is funny because I'm sure that he plays on that. Not really sure what his role is, but his handle is Walter Bloomberg and then at Delta One, and Delta One is Delta One Trading, which would be trading something like futures. So if you're trading perpetual swaps, congratulations, you're a Delta One trader. Okay, so Delta One meaning that the underlying derivative, for every $1 change in the spot asset, the derivative should move, it should move at parity with the underlying spot asset, okay, as opposed to options, which might have varying deltas, which is a big thing to understand when it comes to hedging things. So if you're hedging something like futures or spot with options, and if you see me do this a lot and blink, it's because these things are actually drying my eyes out. It's a little bit early in the morning. So Walter Bloomberg, he posted about everything that you really want to be aware of in traditional markets, but he also has a lot of things with regards to cryptocurrency because, as you can imagine, cryptocurrency has become more front and center. So Powell specifically saying that the Fed is evaluating benefits of digital cryptocurrency, okay, digital currency. So this is kind of obvious. It seems like the United States is a little bit behind the ball when it comes to this, and it is again obvious that it's an inevitability. Okay, evaluating the benefits of digital currency, as if it's not very clear what the benefits of digital currency are. Cash is dirty. Okay, I went over that in the last video, and no pun intended, but cash is dirty, right? Especially if you consider how it sort of fits in a time when there's a very serious pandemic that's taking place. So cash is dirty, right? And cash is also something that's obviously favored by anyone who is taking part in illicit activities, whether it's dealing drugs or you might have difficulty laundering a large amount of cash, but cash is the preferred method. I think that I speak for the criminals of the world. I think it's their preferred method of transaction. I don't think that you're going to see a lot of drug dealers doing you know, deals with an American Express card. So there are very obvious benefits of going digitalized. Okay, now you could sort of come up with the nightmare scenarios as to how this might technically go wrong, but I think that we're well past that in terms of technology, to where they should be able to regulate and monitor anything that is enacted by them. So the fact that he's saying that they're evaluating the benefits are clear. Now, how this fits in a system that already has these sort of crypto native cryptocurrencies or cryptocurrencies in general, I guess is the one thing that needs to be figured out. Now, if anything, whenever the Fed or central banks, when they talk about cryptocurrency, I use the phrase that it's sort of proof of concept. Okay, if a few years ago, or even a few months ago, if anyone was saying, what place do cryptocurrencies have in an economy or in the world, it's very clear that they have a place, because now you have people like Jerome Powell that have clearly been talking about them for a very long time now. So in a way, that recognition again is just that. It's proof of concept. All right, there's a place for it. So that being said, make no mistake, there are obvious benefits to a digital currency, but they're obviously trying to be as smooth and intelligent about this as possible when it comes to implementing one. Because again, it'll be, they don't want to be, I think I shared something this morning about being in first place, right? To be the first to have a digital currency and how that's not necessarily important. Of course, you don't want to rush anything to market, no pun intended, not like they're, it's a product, but you don't want to rush anything to market. So that makes sense, but I think that it's clear that it is the direction that everything is moving, and it's not that they're going to fall behind, but again, it's just it's a matter of time, and since they've already acknowledged it, might as well move along with the process in a more, again, in a more expedited, faster manner. So that being said, that was the conversation that I talked about. I think I talked about that on Friday. I mentioned how this would be something to look forward to. That was 8 a.m. this morning, and whether or not Bitcoin moved up because of that, I didn't actually look at the Delta One response or that news release, or I didn't listen to Powell's speech. It's Monday morning, so at 7:45 in the morning, I was waking up, getting ready for my niece to get dropped off so that we could watch her for the hour and then take her to school. Because they both, I mentioned this before, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, they both work in healthcare, so they drop one of our nieces off a few days a week. Okay, so one last thing I want to touch on. I don't do a whole lot of talking about DeFi, other than what my opinion is with regards to DeFi being something that is a smaller bubble that is within what was talked about as a larger bubble, cryptocurrency. Obviously, bubbles do not go on to continue to regrow and to go on to become actual things that continue. Bubbles, technically a bubble is something that once it bursts, it does not come back alive again, right? However you want to put that, come back alive, inflate, whatever. So DeFi, in my opinion, is just something that is, the flavor of the month. There are definitely, I don't want to say that and sound like I'm knocking the use case or the importance of decentralized finance or the place that it can play and the role that it can play. But let's face it, the way that we are seeing it right now with, assets being named out of, like they sound like they're out of a produce aisle, banana coin, who knows, steak coin. I can't even come up with these names fast enough, but we know that it's a little bit of a caricature of what maybe the more serious participants have in mind for this, right? As far as what the future of this is, right? The role that this will play in traditional markets, or the role that this will play in markets. So we know that this has completely veered off course from anything that's meant to be taken seriously. It has become recently more like a game, where it's like bring something to market immediately. The people that are first in it obviously are gonna do the best. They're gonna gain from everyone else coming in after them, and then they're gonna dump on them. So it's 99% of it is pump and dump, and I don't think that I'm insulting anyone's serious project in DeFi, because if they have a serious project in DeFi, something that even I'm interested in. There's plenty of DeFi projects that I'm interested in. You could consider Link a DeFi project. Then they're hopefully hard at work in a very fastidious manner that is not trying to be a pump and dump, and I think we have an idea of how to separate what is quality and true from what is garbage. And apparently lately there's a lot of garbage. Now, one of the things that you could look at with DeFi is, and I just want to say that because I don't want to knock, I don't want to talk about it too broadly, even though right now we know it's at that point where it's just kind of, it's all this garbage is coming out, because there are people that are actually hard at work trying to implement things that are, again, very important and very useful, and do rather have a use case. So one of the things with DeFi, one of the metrics that we could look at is the total value locked. So I posted this on the BlockRoots Substack that I sent out last night to subscribers. So we posted the macro one. We do that on Sundays now. We're going to shift it up, and then Josh will do the altcoins. That'll come out. That should be out today. So altcoin opportunities. So this is ETH. This is BTC, and then I mentioned DeFi, and I talked about total value locked up. So total value lockup is essentially, or total value locked, TVL. It is the amount of collateral, the amount of liquidity that is locked up in the DeFi pool. So, this value has, it went from, I think just a few weeks back, it was just $1 billion, and most recently it's been hovering around 11 billion. So 11 billion in capital locked up. Now, the important thing to know with total value lockup is that this is more often than not, if it's in USD value, right? If you're looking at TVL and USD value, a lot of that TVL is going to be determined by the price of ETH, right? Because you can imagine this is part of the ETH protocol. So if ETH goes up, then total value lockup is going to go up, right? And the underlying assets go up, then total value lockup is going to go up. So it's important to know the distinction between the amount of ETH locked up versus the amount of USD locked up. And what we could see over the last, this is almost now over the last month, right? A little bit less than a month, that it's kind of began to taper off. So whether this is a longer term top or it's just a period of sideways consolidation remains to be seen. I think that DeFi has, at least for the next few months, I think it's run its course. I think that we actually need maybe a couple months of sideways price action, sort of the crap to dissipate, enough people to dump to where we find a floor in a lot of these assets, because a lot of them are overextended. Okay, when you look at DeFi projects across the board, it was like it was essentially an alt season. Everyone talks about alt season as if it's something that we're always constantly waiting for around the corner, but we just had something that was, I guess, the equivalent to an alt season. Alt season being a period where altcoins have tremendous growth, and we obviously just saw that, and this was something that it took place for quite some time. And I made a lot of money in DeFi. Everyone I know made a lot of money in DeFi, but holding on to DeFi projects is, again, it's extremely dangerous. So I think where we're sitting right now is we are in a position where Bitcoin is likely going to outperform, Bitcoin and ETH likely going to outperform everything. We're in a position where Bitcoin is likely to go up in dominance. So if we're looking at Bitcoin dominance, for example, we're seeing that it's beginning to trend up. And this is just an indication that Bitcoin is gathering strength, and rather is gathering all the attention in the market, just to put it very simply. So when Bitcoin dominance goes up, this is a sign that alts are suffering, right? These are inversely correlated. Doesn't mean that everything's going to suffer, okay? It doesn't mean that everything is going to suffer at the expense of Bitcoin moving up. Bitcoin dominance can go up as Bitcoin crashes as well. But I think where we are in this cycle is we're at that period where we're going to see that a lot of people might not necessarily have been completely exposed to BTC because they've been more interested in these DeFi pairs and in this sort of decentralized finance mini bubble. So I think that since there's a lot of people that are essentially short Bitcoin by being participants outside of Bitcoin, we're going to see that as Bitcoin continues to move either slightly upward or go on a run from here, we're going to see a lot more of that fleet equality effect where people that are not exposed to BTC are sort of chasing after that. And that will show up by Bitcoin dominance increasing. So that doesn't mean that ETH will necessarily be harmed. I think that there are certain pairs that are likely to, it's crypto and coffee, I'm forgetting to drink my coffee. I think that there are certain pairs that are going to outperform with BTC. So for example, Link has remained strong. Link is also, what it seems that Link has done is gone through its period of, its run up. So this period right here, that was before ETH and BTC, if you guys remember. Link sort of had a lead. You know, it's not that I don't think Link is at the point yet where people are looking to it the same way they look at ETH to lead the market, but this could potentially be giving us a sign a little bit earlier because Link also went through its correction before BTC and before ETH. And now, you know, maybe you could say that Link is arguably in a position where it is the most clear asset that is having sort of its post-base breakout. Even though, you know, technically this structure and the ETH BTC and you know the BTC structure on its own, they look different. Bitcoin's sort of at a point right now where I guess you could say the same thing because Bitcoin is within a prior range. It's sort of back at the most recent, and you know this is the high as of the last year. This is the high going all the way back to, you know, 2019. So Link though is something that I think that if BTC continues to go up, I have to remember to not say BTC like that. I just have to say Bitcoin because it's sort of a force of habit. It's like it trips my mouth up. So Link, I think, is one thing that will outperform with Bitcoin. Okay, so Link is sort of a higher beta to Bitcoin's lower beta. So if Bitcoin is the benchmark, then you know, then Link is a higher beta, just like ETH. So I would say that I'm confident in Link, ETH, Bitcoin by default, and also DOT. So for some reason, DOT has maintained relative strength even in the face of everything showing weakness, right? And DOT is one of the more recent pairs that was released to market during this whole DeFi push. Now, DOT has a lot more capital backing it. So DOT is, I think DOT's almost a $4 billion market cap. So we have to look at that. So Polkadot is, yeah, so it's $3.7 billion in terms of market cap. Okay, so this is not exactly something that's going to be as reflexive as something that's maybe a $5 or a $10 million market cap coin. So I think that DOT, being that DOT has shown relative strength over the last few weeks, I think that that's a sign that it's also going to be something that outperforms when BTC outperforms as well. So if we're looking at the most recent weekly consolidation, or if we just go to something like the daily, which the daily low initially, after DOT's major run up, the first daily closing low that we put in before we had this sort of subsequent smaller and smaller bounce that followed, we haven't really done much to put in downside action, right? We've had moves to the downside, but each move has been slightly smaller. And more recently, we've seen that the response by buyers has actually slightly gone up. So this is something that I don't want to say to get in too early because technically it is a lower high, right? So we still do have sort of very basic indications by the trend that it is in a downtrend still. But what we could have is the beginning of a higher low and a higher high. Okay, more recently. So remember, this is your more recent high. You still have highs that precede that. For me, I think the more important level is to get back above this daily level. So back above that daily level, and then if you're really conservative and you really require a lot more from price, then you could wait for this high to break. So something like this, and I've said over the past few weeks, 450. I think that a break of 450 and a successful hold and retest of that, I think that that's a good sign that things are on the up and up. I always say though, as a reminder, there's a high probability that if we're doing that on the DOT chart, that you're already seeing on the Bitcoin chart that, you know, we're continuing upward. Not so what I guess I'm also implying there is that DOT is probably not going to do that on its own. If it does that on its own, that's great. It's a sign, I guess, of the market, you know, again, moving independently and things not being so correlated. And DOT actually has been one of the lesser correlated pairs that we've seen. So if we go to skew and we'll go to, should be, I think it might be under spreads, or here we go. So if we look at DOT, okay, the correlation is 0.79. This has actually slightly gone up. So, you know, the last time that I checked the correlation chart, DOT's correlation was slightly lower. So that argument's kind of nullified. So it is more correlated to BCC, but I guess the point was anyway, I was saying that if it was moving on its own, then that would be an indication that it was becoming less correlated. So I was kind of satisfied what I said to begin with, because right now they are correlated, but if it started moving on its own, it would be a sign that maybe it was breaking that stronger correlation. So I think that those pairs will likely improve together. Now let's get to where we sit with Bitcoin. Make sure did I leave anything out I wanted to talk about? Oh, we have the effective federal funds rate. So this is just interest rates, right? And this is one of the reasons why I think that we're going to see equities continue to outperform. So interest rates are low. Okay, cost of money is low. People can borrow money. That's sort of a form of stimulus, obviously. So equities, risk on assets are going to be benefiting from this. And we've seen how Bitcoin is sort of a chameleon, right? It's a hybrid. It's either sometimes going to be trying to be, it's trying to fit the bill of being a store of value. Sometimes it's a risk asset. I think that it's always going to be a risk asset if risk assets are bid, okay? And hopefully, because you wouldn't want to see that risk assets are being bid and, the store value argument is holding where Bitcoin is not following them up. But I think that Bitcoin is more of a play on the S&P 500 for a lot of larger participants, maybe traditional market participants. I think that they're looking at BTC as sort of a, higher beta play on equities. And I think there's good reason to think that. Okay, it is a more mature asset now. Cryptocurrencies are becoming a more mature asset class. Bitcoin is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of cryptocurrencies. I don't think that these hedge fund and fast money types are really considered with what's taking place on the, the coin that's the 50th coin on the list. I think that maybe venture capitalists are interested in those pairs, potentially pairs outside, obviously, of the main pairs that we're familiar with. But I think when it comes to trading and, taking advantage of these correlations, it's obviously the case that there's a correlation between Bitcoin and equities right now. We saw that the dollar, again, took a little bit of a spill this morning, and in quick response, Bitcoin moved up as well. This obviously all sort of coinciding with Powell's speech also, which was clearly not just about Bitcoin, right? It wasn't like this speech is about Bitcoin. It was about currency, right? It was about digital currencies, and obviously that implies some sort of relevance to the dollar. So as far as that goes, interest rates, as long as they remain low, I think that the macro play is to be in BTC. I think that it's also easy right now with what's going on in DeFi to really lose sight of the bigger trade that's at play. And I've been saying this for quite some time, that once you break the major levels on the chart, it's obvious to you, it's obvious to everyone else, even the most least sophisticated traders and macro traders, right? They're going to take a look at a chart. I hate when people say that people in traditional finance don't look at a chart. Everyone looks at a chart, okay? When you're watching CNBC, there's always that chart with either the red dot on the line chart or the blue dot, the green dot. There's always a chart that's referenced. It's the first thing that people look at, pretty much, and it gives you an honest sign of whether or not, or gives you an honest indication of whether or not things are on the up and up, okay, or they're on a constant decline. So with BTC, let me see if there's questions. Good morning, everyone still here. Morning from Florida. Completely agree. Gave up after losing money farming. Yeah, I think that so that when it comes to total value locked up, okay, as soon as this starts decreasing and there's less yield to go around, it sort of becomes a vicious cycle, obviously, right? When you see that there's less yield to move around, when you see that rather there's, just imagine this as, less pie left, there's less to go around for every participant. It's sort of, again, it's like once you hit that apex, at that point, the only place to go is down until this is essentially forgotten. And I don't want to say forgotten like it's not talked about at all, but there's a certain amount of time that needs to pass after everything that you're seeing is having these parabolic blow off tops. Things don't just continue afterward, right? It takes a really long time. And, a really long time might be 2 months, it might be 3 months, it might be a year. But I think that honestly, you have to be honest with yourself and understand that, after we have something like, people, for example, were looking at Wi-Fi, and after Wi-Fi had this major run-up and lost weekly levels and lost major daily levels, everyone is still looking for the bounce as if it's going to be just a bounce and upward. I've been saying about Wi-Fi now for 3 weeks. I've been saying about DeFi, main pairs in DeFi, that they're probably going to continue to bounce on their way down. And if not, we have very clear levels that are the areas that we would say would invalidate maybe our short thesis. So if my short thesis is that these major levels are holding, well, then the long thesis is on the other side of that. Okay, but the point is, it's right there. But the point is, right there is on the other side of a very thick plexiglass wall. You could see the long opportunity. It's right there, but I don't think that these are going to be showing up anytime soon. Maybe in Wi-Fi. So maybe in Wi-Fi, because it is sort of the first mover and the most popular DeFi pair, because again, it's the most noticeable. It's also the one that, made it up to, we made it up to almost 40, what was this, 45K almost. So this was on everyone's radar. And maybe there is something to be said for Wi-Fi performing well and lifting up the rest of the market. But until we see this, that's the point. Until we see some sign of a major base that's formed, sideways price action, and then breaking out of that range, there's no reason to step in front of them on the assumption that that's going to occur after you get in your position. So something like SRM as well. So I was super confident in SRM. Very confident in SRM, but I immediately got out once market structure stopped the upward trend. Rather, once we saw that the upward trend had stopped. So now my left eye is starting, my left contact is literally just starting to dry up. So I woke up this morning and I don't even think that, I hate to admit this, but I did not take my contacts out last night before I went to bed. So right now, major area in market structure that stands out that we're finding resistance at, it's this first major low on the chart, okay? So first major low on the chart, that's right around, we're looking at that, that's right around 150, and we're continuously making progress to the downside. So for me, the way I look at alts is we have to retake the last major structural level on the high time frame. So right now, the only way that I will even consider getting in a longer position with SRM is if we're starting to get back above these levels. I don't care if we're down here, and just to give you an idea of what I mean by that, I don't care if we're down here and we start putting in strong price action. I might take trades, right? If we break below this low, if we break below the low with conviction, trade back above it, I might take a short-term trade back to this high. But there's no way that I'm getting in a position trade, so a longer-term position, until we reclaim those major levels in market structure. One other thing that I want to talk about before I take some of your, I just spit on my screen. One of the things I want to talk about before I take some of your pair requests is perspective, right? This is a good example. Someone asked me about this chart. Someone asked me about this chart during the last live stream, and this is a really good example of perspective and why perspective counts, what perspective you're coming from. So we have an AVAX chart. This is on OKX. We have an AVAX chart. This is on Binance, okay? What we're seeing is the same range, right? But this is coming off of a major flag, and this is coming off of a major dump. I would say personally, just to be honest, if I was looking at these charts and I did not know that they were the same pair, hopefully I would be astute enough to recognize that these things were damn near perfectly correlated. Sorry. Hopefully I would be able to recognize that. But if I was looking at these and I thought that they're completely different pairs, and I didn't know from where they were coming before this price action, I would probably look at this as being something that I would be looking to get long at some point in the near future. That's because this looks like a base, right? It's coming from much higher. Big dump, high volume dump. Obviously, you would hope that there was much more price action above to indicate that this traveled a really far distance before doing this. But what is far distance either way, right? So we have a major low, okay, swung in again. You have your first major high. You have, again, that level being respected. It's an altcoin, so remember, these are going to be kind of loose. But I would be looking at this, and I'd be saying, this looks like it's bottoming out. And what would I be doing? I'd probably be saying that if this is the weekly structure, which is not enough price action now, let's go to the daily. I would more than likely be saying, and I technically am saying this right now, if we're back above this daily level, that 470 level, then maybe this is a good swing long because maybe we have at that point put in our bottom. Now, if I was looking at this on this chart, I might come to the same conclusion that this is a worthwhile break, okay? But I'd be much more worried about this chart, right? Because this looks like, an entire gap. We're just sitting on the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss. So that's an important thing to note because someone asked me about this chart during the last live stream, and the first one that I pulled, I don't remember if it was this chart or if it was the other one, but it immediately provoked me, it immediately caused me to have a sort of emotional reaction to the chart. I don't mean I got emotional. I mean that I saw the chart and I immediately judged it. On face value, I thought, I think it might have been this one. I looked at this and I was like, ooh, that's, what it reminds me of is just an SRM that's a little bit more behind, right? Because SRM, we have a major low within structure. Same thing you could be saying, though, is I guess you could say that this is the first high, even though that these are right now, they're on the same timeline. And, one chart is much different in length than the other. Is it? This goes back to the 23rd SRM, so it's a little newer. Yeah, this goes way back. But either way, I'm looking at SRM, and initially I got involved in SRM back here. So during that sort of 3-minute consolidation, did something I normally wouldn't do, which is get into something that's that extended. But this was during a whole time where everything was on the up and up. But I would be looking at sort of this AVAX chart, like the SRM is, it's an indication of things to come, or that AVAX is likely just going to follow every other pair. It could just very well be, though, that now that I know that AVAX, for example, for anyone who's interested in it, it is a more recent pair. It's a more recent listing. Maybe it's arriving at the right time, right? So maybe what we're going to see is the DeFi pairs that are going to continue to correct. Maybe they're finding their base. Maybe AVAX doesn't need to go through much, it doesn't need to go through too much hurt, and maybe this will offer some sort of play in the near future. But the purpose of this was to talk about this perspective. And a long time ago, this was, who was it? CZ Binance talked about someone who they fat fingered a chart. So what happened was, and this gets into the last thing before I take your chart request. When you look at a chart like this, it affects your psychology, right? It immediately causes you to have a response because you can't deny what you're seeing. So there was a time, this was over a year ago, when someone fat fingered a Binance pair. And what happened was they accidentally, I think they accidentally bought way higher. And what happened was there was a big red candle that resulted from that. I can't remember honestly how it happened, but CZ said that the guy was saying, I made a mistake, I fat fingered, can we reverse the transaction? And obviously the answer is really no, you can't, because there was a counterparty to that ended up doing well, right? That took the other side of the trade. And also CZ's response, which was maybe a little bit too abrasive, was that the guy ruined the chart. Okay, he ruined the chart because essentially it looked like just one big red candle. Okay, and this just gets to the idea that how the chart looks is going to interpret our confidence, is going to rather how the chart looks is going to, I guess, instill a level of confidence in us or lack thereof. All right. Okay, so get LASIK. Yeah, I have. I'm getting LASIK because my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law that I said work in healthcare. He is someone who does LASIK. So whatever that person is called. So let's see. I don't remember, either he does LASIK or he knows the doctor. Who knows? Yeah. Okay, so that's the worst. Get one. Yeah. It's not like I haven't slept with my contacts before. So let's look at BTC real quick. So we had this move up. Looking at this range, so I have left these levels on here now, going back a couple days. This is going back. I probably had these levels on back on the 14th. And they've still been sort of the levels that I've been paying most attention to. Now, I was short yesterday and again removed my second short for this week. I'm happy I did, although I had asks that were slightly above here, and I've removed those as well. But now I'm kind of wondering whether or not this has the strength to push up much further. But this is the range that we have been auctioning within for now. We're looking back, going all the way back since the 10th. And this again is the area where 70% of the trading volume took place and the trading time was spent. So where we spent the most amount of time and where most of the activity occurred. So it's both the volume value area and the TPO value area. This wasn't really showing any kind of major signs of absorption. So at the highs, I was getting in short because this looked like it was setting up for maybe a press upward and then a dump downward, because you had sort of this gradual step process upward. And we've seen a lot of times, if we just go back to a period like this, where these moves have preceded moves that have completely reversed and brought us back down to the point in which we left, right? So back down to this little micro range we had. So I'm actually happy that I got out of that trade, but there wasn't really enough signs to leave it on. It's not like we had absorption to the upside. So if we look at something like CVD, going back to this point, and going back to the point that I was looking at when I started getting in short, it was over here, but I had my ass further up. there was really no sign that buyers were getting overly aggressive. So CVD again shows us the amount of the cumulative volume delta, which is the aggressive buys versus aggressive sells. So no signs that buyers were being absorbed at the high. Instead, the only sign of absorption we had was more recently at the low, so right here. So more selling pressure, yet price moving further up. Price retaking VWAP, so importantly retaking the weekly VWAP, the daily VWAP, and again favoring the top side of that value area. So, if you look at the value area in a range, at the extremes as being the areas to look for an immediate response by the other side of the market, right? If you rejected buyers over here, very strongly rejected consistently over time, then why on this period are you suddenly able to creep up without much of a problem? Okay, so that's just more of a sign that this was acceptance before we actually gained acceptance through. So acceptance before we actually had this final break up here. I think that right now, it wouldn't be out of the question to expect some type of correction. But again, I would be looking for a response back down at that sort of 11,490, 11,5 level. It looks like acceptance to the upside, but we've seen times before where we've had these presses upward, and then instead, that final press has resulted in a correction. And if we just look at the sort of rotation size of these periods, so from this rotation to where we currently are, it's not too far-fetched to assume that that might be something that maybe we should guard against. That being said, we are back within a prior range. And I think that if I was going to put things in terms of the order of operations, I would say that this is more important. So right now, where we sit, I think that we're still in good position, final judgment to move back up to that 12,000 level. You can see that I have a red line right between where we are. And that's sort of the area that we're finding resistance up here. Remember, it's not the line that matters, it's the zone. That 11,751 level is the point of control of this entire range. So if we go back to this range back here, this level, okay, I'll just show you what it is. That is the point of control for that range. Okay, so that is where the most amount of volume was transacted. Now, when you gain acceptance back within a prior range, so if we're moving back to a prior range, and I shared an article on Phemex last night that'll be posted, if you move through a gap and you gain acceptance into a prior range, you're more than likely going to not necessarily just cover the range, but you're more than likely obviously going to spend a good amount of time contesting with the previous point of control. So that is this red line right here. And you can see that it's not just that line, right? It was that distribution, that's where it got really thick. So above that, there's not much more. There's the naked point of control from a single day, and then there's another naked point of control from a day prior up there, and that's just a single day's point of control. So where most of the volume was for this day right here, and where most of the volume was for that day right there. That being said, there's not a whole lot of resistance further up. So for everyone who talks about this being a higher time frame range, I would remind you that, and I don't want to say that because people trade their system and it is what it is. If it works for you, why change it? But for this entire structure, there's really nothing that took place up here. You got a small, node right there, but most of the distribution is right where we've been from 2018. Okay, this period up here, and now where we're back right now. And if we're looking at this as a range on the lower time frame, my judgment would be if this was your value area high and this is your value area low, okay, we made a move lower. It's a completely different structure. It's hard to say that this is just one big range and you treat this as the value area, but it is what it is, right? That's the volume value area. So we're back within the structure. Again, rejected at the low of value. Now imagine though, the important thing to recognize is that this is creating as it's gone along. So it's really easy to go back and say, oh, we came back down to the value area low. So we have to make sure that this is sort of has been the value area low, which it has. So even before we had that dump, that was the value area low as well. So not much has changed. So that's a really good thing to pay attention to, because this is the most important level, I think. This is the last barrier, I think, before any major move. And if I'm looking at this right now, that doesn't look like it wants to pull back. It looks like it wants to gun above that high. So point being, above sort of, let's say, above 11.5, 11.6, and this is on a weekly chart, right? So it's not a 5-minute candle above it. If you close the weekly above that level, there's nothing. There's really nothing between us and the all-time high. And things can get very slippery at that point. Things can get slippery. My mouth is getting sticky. It's time to go for the water instead. I suggest everyone drinks fresh squeeze lemon water in the morning, fresh water with lemon squeeze in it. So above that 11.6 level, 11.55 level, there's really not a whole lot. And if I was looking at this as a range, right, if I was just treating this as a range on the 5-minute candle, on a 5-minute structure or 5-minute setting, I would say, hey, it really looks like we like to favor the top side more, right? We've already dealt with it up here, came down to make a low, came back up to the high. Now, instead of coming all the way back down to the low, we found buyers sooner. And in the last few months, we've been really favoring the high. So if I was going to place bets onto which side is likely to break, well, hey, when one side of the market exerts himself, he usually leaves something like that, right? And again, this is sort of just an analogy between this weekly chart, or comparison between this weekly chart and what it would look like on a lower time frame. But when you have a range that's being respected, the highs don't allow you to have access if you're a buyer. They don't allow you to maintain any kind of presence there. Sellers made themselves clear on these tests upward. Okay, so if we're looking at, again, I talked about this in the last live stream, the areas I was focusing on after we dumped down here even were these previous wicks. So now we're back into a level right here where sellers previously were able to say, no, get back. Okay, now instead we're back at that level and we're just kind of walking our way in. It's telling you something about the amount of, in this case, the amount of resistance that's actually there. It's at least at this point it's depleted, which means that we're likely to continue to press higher. Take water. Okay. Okay, this might be a pleb question, but when are you leveraging BTC? Is the risk measured in dollars or BTC? So whenever I measure risk, I always I guess this is one thing I haven't optimized for. I guess I haven't optimized it for BTC. I've always measured everything in USD. In these conditions, though, the way we've been in the past, in more recent past, I've prioritized BTC growth. So what that means for me is, like, let's say that I'm trading an alt. I'm not immediately going to USD. I'm going to BTC. I'm sort of in this Bitcoin accumulation mode. But when it comes to risk, I do everything in dollar terms. When it comes to leverage, I don't really use leverage. I use leverage to not have to put my entire balance on the exchange, but I don't really ever, I guess what I should say is I do use leverage, but it's because I don't put my entire balance on any exchange. I only put a very small portion of it. So I'll lever my balance up to represent my off-exchange amount, when I'm sort of trying to make sure that I keep in line with those risk parameters, so that I could give myself the same amount of exposure I normally would if I had all my money on the exchange. But I don't really use leverage to increase my exposure. If I do, it's probably 3 max. More often than not, increased exposure for me just means 2 times leverage. And again, it's better when you're allowed to even play. It's better when you're in a position where you can place a tighter stop, so that you can technically afford yourself that. So if I have a 1% account balance risk per trade, which is not exactly how I trade anyway. So just to be completely honest, the things that I talk about when it comes to using stops, when it comes to, I'm probably blinking hard now because when I do that, I'm trying to make my eyes, if I yawn, if I squeeze my eyes tight, especially when I yawn, my eyes tear. So I was always that person that looked like they were crying when they yawned, but my eyes going dry. But if I say, for example, I say more commonly people that are trading for a long time will say, you should always abide by certain risk measures. One of them is to always place stops. One of them is, risk management is to position size accordingly, across the board consistently. That's not necessarily the case. I will more often than not, for setups that I have that I know have high hit rates, I'll risk more. That being said, if there is, say for example, just generic example, if you have a per trade risk of 1% of your account balance, if you're looking at a trade and the proper stop placement is for that trade 2% away, well then technically you could only risk 50% of your account balance, right? Or you can only trade with 50% of your position, excuse me. Now, the flip side of that is, let's say that you risk 2% of your account per trade and the setup for your trade, not something that you're creating, right? The optimal stop placement for the trade is actually closer than that. Let's say that the risk per trade is 2% and the stop placement for this particular setup is 1% away, meaning you don't have to put, that is the perfect stop placement. You do not require any more to invalidate the trade, which is the important thing to say, is that the stop is the area where the trade is invalidated. So it's not just something you pull out of a hat. Now, what that means, if you're risking more and your stop placement is closer, technically you could have 2 times exposure, right? Because even if you double your position size as in what you normally would, if you're stopped out on a 2% account risk in a 1% move, then you're still, the same amount is still at risk, right? Even with that double increased exposure. So I don't really use leverage. I only use it if I have, I only increase my exposure in that way, because a lot of new traders talk about leverage as if it's not for counterparty risk, and they talk about it as if it's going to vary per trade. I only use that if I have a really high hit rate setup. Is it a good time to BTC or wait it for retest? I personally, I would not want to buy at resistance, because technically we are at resistance. I tell people who are maybe not as privy to some of the things that we talk about, or as advanced, that it's good to dollar cost average into something if you want to have exposure to it. I don't want to say that now is a good time to buy BTC, because a lot of the times after a big move, you don't get a retest. If we're being honest, you don't get a retest after big moves. So let's just say, for example, okay, imagine we get something like this. And I'm just going to try to go through your feelings as this is occurring, because I'll show you something. Let's say you get a big move like this. So you get a big move and we get a massive candle that goes up to, let's say it goes up to 13.5. Not unrealistic, right? Everyone talks about a level that's in front of us and then it blows through it by a considerable amount. You get a big move like this and Bitcoin flags up here. I buy that flag because that's usually the pullback you're getting. It's on a 5-minute time frame. It's the small flag. Now after this, Bitcoin continues to move up. Okay, this is the point where if you didn't buy the flag, you're really getting worried. And at this point, you're thinking, I have to chase this. Bitcoin continues to chop higher for maybe a week or two, because after a big break, there tends to be a considerable amount of follow through. At least we're looking at, I say at least, you're looking at least 10 days of follow through after a major break, at least from what we've seen in the past. So now Bitcoin chops around. Now you ended up buying up here because you're really worried. After weeks, you get the final return back to this level, and it might not last long. So instead of, because I don't know where you are in your trading, I don't know what kind of system you implement, instead of me saying, now is a good time or a bad time, for your holding, if you're holding for your holding portfolio, if you want exposure, your best bet to really take your emotion out of it is to dollar cost average in over time. I would say I would start getting into value averaging, but that requires a little bit more, I don't want to say it requires any expertise, but value averaging requires a bit more brain power than just dollar cost averaging, which is averaging in a certain amount over time. Okay, I want to go on Phemex trading competition. So join up. Join our team. Join our team. I'm going to probably try to, I'm going to try to grow fast in the beginning and then play conservative at the end, because competitions, the ones that win are the teams that have 300, 200 plus, 100 plus teammates, and they all just do a different sort of high frequency approach and hope that the outlier carries everybody else. So as far as, anyone have any pairs that they want to see? As far as BTC right now, I think that we're in good position. Newsletter, if you guys are following the newsletter, the same levels apply. For me, if I got to get rid of some of these levels so that it makes it easier on you guys. If I'm just looking at this from higher time frame market structure, it just speaks to advance. So speaks to advance. So I hope that didn't sound too advanced, to the process of advancing. So if we're looking at, this is sort of the important contextual level that I've been talking about now for weeks. Okay, here's your first major retest, and this is sort of like what I was just talking about a second ago. If you were sitting back, going all the way back to this point, and you're asking, should I buy BTC right now? I don't know. You get this break. At that point, you probably started buying up here. okay, because you don't get the initial pullback, but you do get the return over time. So we got that major retest. Everyone's looking at this consolidation. Is it going to break up? Is it going to break down? You finally do get a breakdown. You get the retest. And then the first thing you get is the bearish retest. And this is the point that anyone who's expecting the trend to reverse, they're going to be looking to short this because it's a backside retest. Rather than them sort of pick a spot in thin air and try to short that with a limit, they're looking for a sign of a breakdown. Now, I kept saying during this entire period that it's not this rejection and this consolidation to pay attention to. It's the fact that we broke out of this major range that requires, I guess, more attention and should be prioritized. So if this, and I always try to say, imagine this as just to visualize this, right? If this is your bearish retest right here of the underside of this structure, okay, it should have been done from there. It shouldn't have been allowed to make an advance again back over that level. It's the same concept we talk about in auction market theory, right? Buyers and sellers are going to exert themselves at those levels. When we start to see that their presence or their participation is no longer showing up at those levels, there's a good argument to be made for those levels likely being overtaken, whether it's to the downside or the upside, right? So this should have been enough to do your work, right? It should have at that point continued down. Instead, we're back within a previous range, okay? So we're back within a previous range, and I think that it's just very obvious. I think at this point, I hate to say that because this thing will break down to 9.8K, and I'll keep saying that it's very obvious. But if you're looking at this just from a technical standpoint, it's showing signs of strength. That's all we can go by. Place your bets, look for your high probability setups. Some you get, some you don't. Okay. Do you reckon TWAPs have any merit in dollar cost averaging? So yeah, TWAPs are useful. Okay, TWAPs are useful. I have a TWAP bot that's set up on TradingView. It's integrated with. It's not integrated with Phemex because it's what is it called? I don't remember what the Alertatron has a TWAP. Yeah, TWAPs are useful. Now most TWAPs though you're going to be using market orders. Something that's better in certain market conditions than using an iceberg over time. But I do think that TWAPs can be useful in dollar cost averaging. It's just a way that you're automating that dollar cost averaging process. And I believe that Michael Saylor and MicroStrategies, they use a TWAP. Now, obviously, their TWAP method is going to be different than what I just talked about, which is a crude bot on Alertatron, which sets up a TWAP for you. But yeah, TWAPs are very useful. You only have to get rich once. That's right. But it's very easy to lose it. Is YFL closely correlated to YFI? So I think that, so if we look at YFL, so one of the things you could do, it's not a correlation chart, but it can help you see sort of, I'm going to get rid of these. I know where they are. I'll put them back. We'll go to compare, and we'll add YFL. Okay. We'll just do add symbol so we don't compare it by percentage terms. We could change that after, though. We have Tether and then YFL Tether. Okay, let's put the line chart on for the other one. Let's just go to the low time frame to see if these are correlated. Why is that showing up like that? Why is it so ugly? Is it that illiquid? Maybe it is. Okay, let's put on the... One second, put the candles on this one. Oh, it's so liquid. Okay, hold on one second. Maybe I can't put that on. Is this the same chart? This is. So I'll add this. Okay, one second. Wi-Fi. Poloniex. Wow. Hopefully that shows up nicely. Okay. So yeah, they are very correlated. This is, I'm adding the right one. Oh, I just added YFL to it. Moron. Hold on one sec. Like, yeah, these pairs are correlated because they're the same exact thing. Okay. Are these very correlated? Yeah, they are very correlated. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that. These are very correlated. They're not, not tick for tick, but it's the same. Listen, what I was saying earlier, all the DeFi pairs are correlated to Wi-Fi to some degree. I think the Wi-Fi is sort of the market leader. Wi-Fi is, I've said this before, it's sort of like the benchmark for DeFi. That's what I think. You know, feel free to refute that. I think that Wi-Fi is sort of like the Bitcoin of DeFi, even though Bitcoin's DeFi too, decentralized, right? But yeah, it's absolutely correlated. I think that if Wi-Fi is moving up, it's obviously, and it's overtaking its previous major levels. I think that a lot of other pairs can do well also. But I think across the board, I think that DeFi is kind of cooked for now. You know, I don't know a lot about Wi-Fi. I know Josh knows a lot about the fundamentals of these pairs, developments wise, because I always get a little bit hesitant to say fundamentals for certain things. But in terms of developments, what's taking place behind the scenes, which is very valuable to know. So I don't know enough about it, but I do know what I see. And I don't think that in these conditions that anything's going to go to lead on its own. What we see now, so there's different types of conditions that you can be in. You can be in the beginning of a bull market period or the beginning of a hype cycle where all news causes a positive response. So you get a freaking airdrop, a news update, the team is doing something, partnership, and there's an immediate response. Everyone crowds into that, and then that persists. Okay, so then, you know, the trend is up for everything though. So it ends up just sort of making any normal trending movement to the upside that much more powerful. Now, when everything turns and all the pairs across the board are in a decline and there's more bearish trend that's prevalent, you see that the news catalyst, the development catalyst, there is sometimes a response still. So there's an immediate response, but they will go on to completely retrace those moves. So for Wi-Fi, for example, there was a big pump, and we're going back, it might have been September. I feel like it was recently. It could have been this one. It went up to 6. So I think it was this one. So it was the beginning of October. And it had this huge pump, and this was because I forgot what this was. Something, there was some release, right? There was some kind of catalyst. Big pump. And if we look at sort of the important levels within the chart, so first daily, you got daily up there. Okay. So this was sort of, again, at that daily level too, right here. So it looked like it was setting up to perform well, but it all did was completely give all of that price action back. And that's what we see. We see that we're having these candles. I think this happened in SRM too recently. Oh, it did. It's right there. Big move up. And I shared this image. And someone said that this was a bullish thing because people like to spin it like, oh, this is someone taking supply off the market. Yeah, maybe. But it can, you know, if I'm looking at something and it's strong, it should continue. So this instead, it completely gave back all of that. So this is the kind of, I think, these are the prevailing conditions that we are in, which are those of weakness. So we have this sort of bearish chop. You get a big move up, and then it completely, you know, completely retraces the entire move. So yeah, I don't know too much about YFL. I'm hesitant though for every DeFi pair. Algo. Spit your coffee. Okay, nice. All right, let's see. Algo, I'm going to get a pair that's, first we'll look against BTC to see how it's performing. Okay, so you have a very clear higher time frame range. And this is good because it allows us to have very obvious levels to work with. So most obvious, right? That, remember, most obvious to you means they're going to be most obvious to everyone else too. So again, forget the lines, because when I draw lines, I keep saying that they're not lines, they're areas. I wish there was a tool that would allow me to place a box. So I got to tell this to David Bell, who works over at TradingView. Place a box that has a certain width. So let's say I could just place a box similar to a line that would be, you know, I want a box that has a $20 give to the upside and to the downside. So sort of a window. And that would be useful because it is the truth anyway. These are not exactly specific levels, they're areas. So very clear, this is your higher time frame bottom right now, what looks like to be the bottom. On the way down, first support, major resistance, Okay, gained a little bit more acceptance to the upside that period, but now again back at the bottom. The good thing about this is what's very obvious is just that. Once this changes, it's going to be very obvious. You can take plays off of the bottom. At this point, I wouldn't want to continue to play on the bottom down here, though. Honestly, if I'm just speaking for myself, because this, took the upside now. So we took the highs, and now we're back down at the lows. I just see continuation structure against BTC. And again, remember, this is against BTC. I said in the beginning of this video that I think that we're going to see Bitcoin dominance go up. And I think that in these conditions, things are going to they're going to suffer against Bitcoin as Bitcoin moves up, and as dominance moves up, it's going to be because Bitcoin moves up, versus dominance going up because Bitcoin is crashing and everything else is, crashing as well. Again, this can all change, but it's very obvious when it changes. If we do something like this and we're back above this weekly level, so this is a weekly level, remember, then at that point, yeah, we have a different story at play. But that'll become very obvious. For me, you could say, hey, is this an accumulation zone? I don't know. I don't know enough about Algo, if it's a good bet. Let's look at Algo Tether. One sec. Where is the Binance one? Just use that. And sort of the same story. On Algo against Tether, I would say this setup would have been a little bit more obvious to me, and for those of you that are part of BlockRoots, you would see the same thing, I think, that we have a loss and then a re-acceptance, which would set me up more to take a long than this, even though this is technically, so this is, I didn't realize that. Okay. So initially, so down here, so when this is your first range low, break up, break down, this should be bearish continuation to the downside. I drew that arrow in the wrong order. So normally you draw arrows like this, or I do, but I just drew that one like that. That's weird. That's a terrible arrow. I should just do this. So if you're just going to apply this moving forward to other alts, when you have a major structure, and I say this all the time, so I just repeat this ad nauseum, when you have a major structure built with an alt on a weekly chart, on a daily chart, preferably on the weekly, if you lose that and then regain it, for me, it's a long opportunity. So this should have ultimately led to continuation. Instead, we see this bid immediately back up, and now we're back between two previous levels that we were sort of auctioning within. Then I immediately look to the high of that level. So you could look at this high, but I'd probably be looking at this area first. And the same concept that I'm talking about with, hey, we gained acceptance back within a previous range, let's look back at the high. Yeah, that same thing is applying to BTC. So when I talk about this range right here, so this range to me being important, so here's your low, initial high. This was a range for, from the end of July going into the beginning of September. We're gaining acceptance back within the range. Hey, you could even say that this is your retest back within the range. Okay, let's get a straight line there. Let's just do a box, right? Okay. Support, 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 nuke it, retest it. Now we're accepting it. We're accepted back up within it, retest. So I just by default, I am looking at this as a sign of strength, and the first area that I look to is up here. So first area, that's where naked points of control are, and then up there, you're probably coming up there too. Dog's barking, sorry. Yeah, you could set price coordinates, I know that, but I mean like if I was just to take this, sort of this line tool, if I do that, it extends a line across. I wish I could set a box under similar parameters where I could set it and wouldn't have to, oh, so maybe, wait a second. No, but what I mean is, so I could extend this to the left also. So let's see, can I extend that? Style, extend left? Yeah, I can. But what I mean is where I have this set up immediately where like when I go to select this now, it's automatically going to open it up for a certain value. So you see how I had just stretched that? So I have to do this. If I could just have a box that, hey, with alts, like it's a, it's a 1% window, it's not required. It's not necessary. I'm just complaining. Keyboard shortcuts for these drawing tools. Keyboard shortcuts, which is a pain in the butt. So that's why for those of you that follow along, you see how like the live streaming and the using the keyboard tools, it's like not second nature to me. So I always screw up when I'm doing live streams, when I'm doing charting, where I'll be like trying to get a drawing tool open, and then so I'll take the drawing tool that's not native to the crypto, to TV, and I'll place that, and then I'll change the chart, and I'll realize like, oh no, that's the screen drawing tool. I got to use this damn tool. Yeah, that's hotkeys. So I mean, let's look at ETH too, because yeah, ETH is still, the problem is ETH needs to get above this level. I mean, ETH's moved this morning. ETH is just not showing as much strength as BTC. That's fine. Look, ETH is actually showing, I mean, let's look at BTC right now. So ETH is suffering as Bitcoin is moving up. So you can see these are right now inversely correlated. So we have the BTC chart, and then we have the ETH BTC chart. You can see that Bitcoin is moving on its own. So if we look at Bitcoin dominance now, we probably see that, yeah. So Bitcoin dominance, I said this a week ago, is probably going to continue to go up, and I think that means Bitcoin is going to go up on its own. The naked points of control that I'm talking about, those are right here. So we're looking at, one sec, going all the way back to these levels, and the naked point of control right there is, okay, right here. So my line is, I'm trying to just, so would you ask, are these, no, so when I grouped this together, it was from the volume and the TPO being grouped for those last 2 days. And why I did that was because right here, that is the daily swing high right there. So it's the last daily swing high. So you could look at that, there is really no naked volume point of control, because this day right here, the volume point of control was lower, and this day right here was lower as well. So it wouldn't be naked because the next day intersected with it. But what I have is just the point of this is just to find where maybe the most sticky point is within that swing. So I'll combine them. So good question though, because otherwise it would have looked like it's just a TPO point of control. Either way, this whole area is worth just considering, period. So if we're looking at this, it doesn't matter. This is the swing high, and that's obviously there's going to likely be a good amount of liquidity surrounding that. Back to Bitcoin dominance. Yeah. Don't forget ETH2 brings staking with a minimum. Yeah, I know. There is some fundamental driver at play for ETH, but I think Bitcoin is still going to go off on its own for a little bit. And I think we're going to see a lot more developments with regards to Bitcoin and major players entering the space. And it's going to take time for them to release, though. Zinc can launch without an issue. We're likely to see mainnet launch by the end of 2020. Stellar on fire. Dom, long-term, good potential buy. I did Stellar last time. I don't think Stellar is kind of really that relevant right now. I hate to say that, but a lot of the major pairs became irrelevant after the DeFi push. And as you can see on my Stellar chart, the same thing as what did we just look at? Algo. Very correlated. So, same thing though. Here's your major level, 913. Above there, and then you're looking at right up here at 14. But right now within a range. No reasoning to get in position where we currently sit, unless you think that that's the bottom. Atom, I don't have an idea on Atom. Let's see. Yeah. I mean, just looking at some of the major levels that stand out on this chart. Resistance will flip. I mean, there's nothing that really stands out on Atom. Sometimes I'll try to say a little bit more for you to make you feel better, but currently under resistance. I don't think that Atom looks too good from where it sits right now, but that could all change very quickly. This on the micro trend, it's on its way up, right? But I think that I would be more comfortable at least getting above this 5135 level, going back out. First weekly swing low On the way up, resistance. On the way down, support. Resistance as well. Going back, if we just zoom out, it might be easier to see. I didn't mean to draw that line, but it works out either way. Oh, what am I doing? Support, resistance, resistance, support, resistance, resistance, cluster again. So you need to get back above that level, which then opens up. At that point, you know, if Algo is moving up, like I said, then everything is probably doing well also. It's probably not doing it on its own. I mean, Algo, similar to what I said with other pairs. XTZ. And then we're going to wrap it up soon, guys, because we're an hour over into this. I got to pee. XTZ looks like shit, man. That's rough because I was getting in XTZ up here. I got out. I thought it was going to do the same thing as Link. I thought it was going to be similar to the Link chart. Not at all. XTZ is looking like it's hurting. I mean, you're looking at where you currently sit right now. Weekly resistance should be right here. So when we want to be buying into that, next support is technically down there. So there's nothing good looking about this chart right now. I mean, you could say that, hey, here's your daily cluster. If you are above that 21,500, then maybe you have a long back up to that level, but it's not looking good at all. Oh, XLM. They were just talking about it at IMF meeting. Oh, well, it's good for payment system, right? All right, guys. I think that's going to cover it, though. Everything today. Well, Bitcoin today. If you look at what's top gaining. I mean, there's things that are gaining more, but I think that Bitcoin right now is where we're going to see outperformance. Link is moving up with Bitcoin as well, though, right? Link, Bitcoin Cash. I'm just looking at things that are moving sort of with Bitcoin, one for one. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for joining. The next stream will be on Wednesday. We'll take pairs, and I'm going to post the links earlier, so if you want me to chart things, what we'll do is you just send me the pairs you want me to chart, and this way I'll have charts ready for you so that when you ask about them, we could have an idea of what you're interested in and maybe say a little bit more about it other than what the major levels are. Okay, guys? The Phemex competition, all you have to do is go onto my Twitter, and there's a link there. And that's that, guys. Everyone have a fantastic evening. I'll talk to you soon. If you ever have any questions, just message me on Twitter.